We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked Comatose, only on the We Made This podcast network. I am your host, Matt Latham. I am neither Kurt or Mark, which means it's a Brittas Empire special again, this time covering Series 4. And I'm proudly here, not by myself, I'm here with a guest, and as always, it's the least qualified Red Dwarf podcast guest ever, Tony Black.
That is the best description of me, actually, isn't it? Because I really think that is a badge I should go around wearing. The world's least qualified Red Dwarf guest on a Red Dwarf podcast. I'm quite proud of that, actually, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, everyone, if you want a real good laugh, have a listen to the You Have Been Watching special about the theme tunes, because Tony trying to talk about the Red Dwarf theme tune, we're clearly not having any clue what he's talking about, is one of the most hilarious things ever.
Hey, look, I've spent many, many years perfecting the art of blagging. So it's just a good example of it, really. But luckily, I had someone who is very knowledgeable of Red Dwarf with me. So we probably just about got away with it in that case.
I'm sure one day you will give it a watch. But,
I will, absolutely. But not until we've done the Brittas Empire.
Of course.
That's going to be a promise.
Yeah, but talking about the Brittas Empire, we're reaching the apex of the series. We are after this. I don't say downhill trajectory, but we are passing the halfway mark of the 7 series of the Brittas Empire. So we're in 1994 for Series 4, which started airing on the 10th of January all the way through to the 7th of March. Wikipedia likes to inform me that Episode 7 got 9 million viewers and Episode 8 got 7.5 million viewers. So, didn't do anything about the rest of them. But do you remember what you was doing in 1994, Tony?
1994, how old would I be then? I was 12. So I remember, what year would I have been in at school? I would have been in year 7, year 8. So I was a little pip. I do remember, in fact, the abiding memory I have of 1994?
Yeah.
Going to see The Mask. The movie The Mask, and not quite believing that Cameron Diaz was actually a real woman. Because I there's a scene in The Mask where his tongue just goes, that was me at 12 years old. That I think is my abiding memory. Cameron Diaz in the red dress in The Mask. Blimey, I might need a few minutes, Latham. Right, I'm done. Yeah. How about you? What were you doing in 1994?
1994, I was 12 in 97, so I was just starting, or a year or two into juniors, I think. Yeah. I was in year 3 or 4, and I can't remember a thing I was doing. I was probably just playing the Amiga. I was playing the Amiga. I was playing the point-and-click adventure games on the Amiga.
Of course you were.
Yeah.
Of course you were. As was I. But as was I, to be fair. Probably on a very early... No, I probably would have had an Amiga. I was going to say a very early PC, but no, I think I'd have had an Amiga. 94, that would have been Monkey Island 2, right?
Monkey Island 2 was 92. I was playing it, but I was probably playing it by then. So, was Simon the Sorcerer at that point?
I think it might have been. Or it was around that point, wasn't it?
Beneath Still Sky, no, because I'm pretty sure that was 95. Yeah, so, so...
We're in danger of this becoming Ask Us About Loom.
I know, yeah. But,
your video point-and-click podcast.
Yes, if anyone is interested, please go and listen to that.
To be fair, I'm at least being on brand in that I'm talking about anything but Red Dwarf on this podcast, so,
I am very surprised you haven't dropped Sean Connery into things yet, considering the timing is on the day of recording.
Give me a chance and I will find a tenuous link to my new book about Sean Connery. I promise.
Which on the day of recording is released tomorrow. But we are. I don't want to say padding out, but no.
Just say it. Just be honest. Be honest, Latham.
Yeah, we're filler.
We're filler. This is filler.
No, yeah. But I want to add a bit of context. So I thought some interesting context, which I, on reflection, probably could have done in previous episodes. So there's a nice, interesting Wikipedia article called 1994 in British Television.
Oh.
And okay. I thought it'd be quite interesting to have a quick run through some key moments of what was happening in the kind of TV landscape in 1994 because there's some interesting things that are happening or some stuff. So, for example, the 1st of January 94, in the early hours of the morning, BBC Two aired the first Hootenanny.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So for anyone who's not doesn't know what we're talking about, Jules Holland is a person who owns a really kind of a club that won't let people in for some reason in Birmingham. But he's also a kind of musician. I actually don't know what he is apart from a TV presenter.
He's a pianist, isn't he? He's like a jazz pianist, I think.
Yeah,
like he's...
but every year he's got like some on BBC Two. He has the Hootenanny where people just play music. It's recorded about 6 months in advance.
It's an institution. The Hootenanny's an institute. Do you watch the Hootenanny?
No.
Really? I thought you would, because like you like music and it's really eclectic on there. You get some old favourites, but it's really good. The Hootenanny. That's what
I'm trying to get to sleep and getting woken up by bloody fireworks getting off in the streets. I want to be asleep at 10:30.
You're younger than me. What is going on? You're an old man. Like, stop it. Watch the Hootenanny.
Something that's almost relevant to you. 3rd of January, the network television premiere of the James Bond film Licence to Kill on ITV.
Yeah, this was it. This was in the dark years where there was no Bond film being made, so they had to like just keep shoveling them on ITV relentlessly. That took 5 years to get premiered.
Yeah, network TV premiere. Yeah.
Bloody hell. We don't know we're born these days when things pop up on Netflix in like a month or Disney Plus.
Yeah, the US sci-fi series, The New Adventures of Superman, starring Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher, aired on the 8th of January, 2 days before the first episode of this. Now this I found quite interesting in terms of the TV culture, and you might clock on to what I'm talking about as I read this sentence. On the 14th of January, there was an episode of the Channel 4 soap Brookside, which showed for the first time a lesbian kiss between two of its characters. And that was a massive deal in the
Anna Friel.
UK. Yeah.
Anna Friel.
And the other one.
Beth Jordash. She was, I remember this, she was the daughter of her dad killed the person and put him under the patio.
Yeah.
Famous
yeah,
soap opera.
I watched that week because it was like an episode a week. And I remember watching it because my mum used to be loved Brookside. And to be fair, I mean, Brookside, I think, was one of the ones that I think retroactively was cool to like. It's like EastEnders. It's like Mitchell era EastEnders.
It was the dark soap. It was the edgy soap Brookside.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
But I saw that and I'm quite, that's quite interesting to put into cultural context, and particularly when you have kind of, I don't know use the word explicit, but I can't think of another word because it's not explicit in the context I think some people would assume I mean by the word explicit. Yeah. But this is the first on-screen kiss between two females.
I mean, this is going to sound base and pervy, and I don't mean it like that, but I can visualize it now. I don't mean it in that way, but I can. Yeah. I can picture it because I've seen that so often, like since as this landmark TV moment. And I can really see it in my mind's eye. It was remarkable, and it was quite racy and quite sexy, And I think that was part of it. Really, it really like people were like blimey,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you can compare that to what we're talking about, because we'll probably talk about Tim and Gavin and kind of like the more like I can't believe I didn't clock on when I was younger part of the joke type thing. When you have Tim and Gavin's kind of representation in this show, there's quite an interesting kind of like not cultural shift, but it's the kind of foundations of things beginning to happen. So within what is it 5 years? Is it 5-6 years before Queer as Folk? No, actually, no. Queer as Folk is about 3-4 years. It's 97, wasn't it?
No, Queer as Folk was 2000. So yeah, your first guess.
Oh, okay. So it is 2000. Oh, it was slightly earlier.
I think it was 2000.
Yeah, on the 27th of January, popular sitcom Absolutely Fabulous returned for a second series.
Very good. Probably towards its best at that point, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, there is. It will have probably aired by now, but we've done Ab Fab in a massive episode on You Have Been Watching on this network. So that was a really fun deep dive, and I blitzed the whole series in the matter of about a month. And great chat with Rob Turnbull. Do check that out, guys.
Yeah. And something that's a flash in the pan, and people who's probably never even thought of this again, but floats again, but it's quite key in the formation of a series that will appear in a year or two. Chris Evans' first ever episode of a TV show called Don't Forget Your Toothbrush.
I never watched that.
I never watched it, but I'm pretty from what I remember, I think it was a quiz show, and parts of it was like a light entertainment show in between it, and I'm pretty sure TFI Friday was spun off or kind of influenced by the non-quiz bits of that.
Oh, okay.
So TFI Friday is like a massive kind of light entertainment show that was on which when you talk about it sounds like it should be a lot late. It should be post Watershed, but it was like 6:30. And
I'm not sure anyone would quite believe TFI Friday existed. In terms of when it was on and what it did, I don't think anyone would believe me now. Would believe us now if we told them.
Yeah,
to be honest.
And that was more or less during the run of this episode, and a couple of things that happened a bit later in the year. 20th of April, the popular US sitcom Frasier makes its debut on Channel 4.
Classic, which is coming back in the not too distant future for a revival, which will be fascinating and hopefully not terrible. Yeah,
and a sentence that will make no sense to anyone not from the UK. 25th of May, the game show Wipeout, presented by Paul Daniels, first aired. Paul Daniels, to link it back to SHIPWRECKED Comatose, is one of the impressions that Chris Barrie can do.
Okay. Yeah. Well, sterling work there on trying to find a connection back to Red Dwarf and anything to do with this normal podcast.
Yes, but I'm going to end on something which I think will have particular resonance for you, Tony.
Oh, okay.
19th of September, 1994.
Mm.
Do you know what I'm going to tell you?
Is it to do with Star Trek?
Nope. It
I don't know.
It was the UK debut of a little-known science fiction show called The X-Files. The 19th of September, 1994.
A whole year after it arrived in the US, because next year is the 30th anniversary of The X-Files. So
yeah, but I think and as much as we joke that this is like we're now 50 minutes into this podcast recording, as much as we joke on the kind of facts filling, I find it quite interesting that how we can put it into context. In like there are things in terms of kind of British kind of comedy history. I've just seen 27th of September, the debut of The Fast Show.
Oh, very good. In
1994. Again, these are kind of like almost 90s, like kind of linchpin cultural tentpoles of the 90s, particularly in the UK. So I just think I just find it quite interesting to kind of mention that.
So much good stuff in the 90s. There was so much. Looking back now, it's like it was so much of it was great. I mean, there was loads of terrible stuff, but so much of it was great. Like, I miss the 90s, Latham. I really do. I really do.
When John Major was Prime Minister?
Yes, of course. That first 5 years.
Yes.
6 years.
But I think that's interesting. Like, we've got the start of these things, but we're now in the middle of the Brittas Empire. In kind of its run, and in terms of where we are with Red Dwarf, I should have closed it.
Barely even started, really, at this point, isn't it? Is it about series 6? Something like that?
Actually, no. So, okay. In comparison to Red Dwarf, what we're into now, we're actually into kind of the first dark years.
Oh.
I think because we're not airing, so we've not recorded or aired these in kind of in sync with where they aired with Red Dwarf, because by the time you listen to this, Series 7 would have aired, and that was Series 7 was January 97 to March 97. The previous series, Series 6, was October to November 93. So what we're into the period where, like, this is like the first time where there's been a period of, like, there's been 3 whole years with no Red Dwarf on it, and we just started into the first year. So people are probably going, oh, where's Series 7 and Red Dwarf? Where's Series 7 and Red Dwarf? Where is everyone? And at the moment, it's not happening, and I can't exactly remember if Mark or Kurt talk about this in the Series 7 bit, but about why there's a 3-year gap. Well, there are kind of reasons for the 3-year gap, but I'm not going to repeat them. if you listen to this and if you listen to the Series 7 coverage, go back and give him a listen. But yeah, so we're now in kind of the dark years. So we are pretty much now for the rest of the Brittas Empire in the point where there is no Red Dwarf on air.
Okay.
Until the Brittas Empire ends. Right. In fact, I'm pretty sure that actually no. We are. I think the final series of the Brittas Empire is about halfway through before the start of Series 7. So we are pretty much in wilderness time now. But so Series 4 as a whole, what were your general thoughts on Series 4, Tony?
I would say it probably is the strongest season of Brittas yet. And I think that's, I wouldn't say it's damning with faint praise because it's not been a bad show by any means, but it's been very steadily getting better over time. And I'd be lying if I said that I thought the Brittas Empire is a classic. I mean, we rewatched it, is a classic comedy because I don't really think it is. I don't think it's massively funny all the time. And I don't think it's hugely successful or memorable. But I do think this is better. I do think they've got more of a handle on. Well, they very much know the characters by now. They know the kind of tone they're going for. That really locks together this year. That surrealist tone that we've talked about in the last few episodes, and they start to enjoy a level of serialization here, a little bit more, and character development that they've not really done in the same way before.
Yeah.
So that combined makes it probably the most successful season yet, I would say.
Yeah, I think they've got a better handle of the characters. I still think what they do with a few of the characters feels a bit off at times, and kind of disingenuous to what we've seen and established to them.
Yeah.
And I'll get through to them in a bit, but yeah, there's a kind of like, I mean, the serialization or the kind of following through and stuff has always been there since like episode 2, where the fact like they don't actually open the center until then. So that's always been in their minds, and I think I don't know whether, and I think you'd probably know this a bit more, when was like more serialized elements brought into the British sitcom? Because I'm thinking, the biggest one I could think of is Only Fools and Horses.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Well, I can't remember if the earlier series had that strong level.
Not really. It was more when they started doing hour-long episodes or 50-minute episodes. Really, they started to bring in ongoing, recurring stuff, or when they started doing specials and things like that.
When was that?
That would be mid to late 80s, realistically.
Okay. So it is early.
Yeah. And because that show's over in its first iteration by 96, and they don't have that many episodes in the 90s, really. The majority of the episodes of that show are in the 80s. So I think it's a hard question, because I think and I don't fully know the answer, really, but I think comedies traditionally have been quite standalone going back in history. But I think really this sort of overlaps with how drama's starting to do this a bit more now. And you know,
I think we may have had this conversation in previous episodes, because I was about to bring up Hello Hello, and I'm pretty sure we've spoken about the serialization of Hello Hello.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and I think how that was quite, and I think I was quite surprised how that was quite serialized, particularly when it aired. But I think they kind of.
But there was no real character development though in that way. That's the difference. It's like in those kind of shows, they had maybe an ongoing little story, but the characters were the same each week. You know, there was no real difference. Whereas in Only Fools, the characters change. You know, you do see Rodney change. You do see Del Boy change. And that's part of why that show is so successful. And and that's what I think Brittas is toying with, but we'll probably get into the fact that it doesn't quite get there, I don't think, really.
Yeah, I think it's almost there, I think. But then there's a couple of things that so let's get through it. Let's go by episode by episode, like brief talking about, because what we've got 8 rather than 6. And
any idea why that is? Do you know?
Not really, but I think it helps the series, because I think what we do, I think if this was 6, there's a couple of episodes we wouldn't have got, and I don't think we would have got, for example, we wouldn't have gotten like the Gavin episode or the Colin episode that we would have got. I think they wouldn't have had the freedom to. It gives them an extra 2 episodes to explore a couple of characters that don't really have that time, and I think, and which I quite like. But I think it allows, particularly the final 2 episodes, gives them a bit more freedom to expand on the serialization and play a bit with the circumstances and stuff. So as much as we say that it goes, we don't think it's like a really great comedy. It's good in places, but I think it's weird that we're saying that, yet it seems to benefit from more episodes. So so we open up on Not a Good Day, which has as a guest appearance by I think now Lord Sebastian Coe, who I think at the time was an actual MP when this aired. So he was actually an MP at this point, trying to promote something called the Life Cycle Week, which opens with the lead cyclist dying of a heart attack. Which I thought was pretty funny. And then there's a whole thing about and then there's a whole thing in terms of a rogue kid making mischief that he locks in a cupboard. There's a grieving widow, Sebastian Coe again, and quite a very impressive kind of physical, like a mixture of like physical practical comedy alongside kind of this is how we're saving money comedy. Where basically a Roman recreational society basically lays siege and starts to attack to get so, because the guy in charge is actually his son that's in there.
Do you know what I have to say? I thought that was really well done. You really did get the sense they were properly under siege, even though it's just obviously like the crew on the other side of the set lobbing rocks in and thing, and then eventually like a cannon blast or whatever. It's just like it was really good actually. I was really like, this is really funny. It was very funny. Yeah,
there's a great extended set piece where I think about 5 of them, I think it's Gavin, Tim, Colin and Linda and Brittas are in like this one room, and they're just getting spears thrown at them. I think one point a spear goes through Brittas's jacket and he's pinned to the wall. There's a great moment where there's a ladder and a Roman centurion arrives, and then I think Linda pushes him off.
It's so funny because and the episode in that way, it has that surrealist, almost Python-esque bent, but it's also got, I'd say, a little bit of David Renwick in there, a little bit of One Foot in the Grave in the fact the guy dies right at the beginning. Yeah. That's exactly the sort of thing that would have happened in the world of One Foot in the Grave, where, people can just die and drop dead. And that's something that Brittas... It has, I mean, obviously the last few seasons have had people being electrocuted in like swimming pools and all this, but it's not afraid to go down that little dark alley, which is always good.
Okay, yeah. And what I quite like is when they're actually on the top and they're describing what. I mean, you never see it, but like because of budgetary reasons. But I quite like the performances and how they sell. It's like there are hundreds of them. They've got elephants.
yeah. And then you hear the elephant. Where'd they get elephants from? Yeah, that's
like,
funny.
And you get this, and it's. I really like the comedy, and like they don't try and show it. And you only see a couple of centurions, I think.
Well, the joke would just die if you saw them, because it would be ridiculous. It would be like about 3 people dressed up in like some armor. But the comedy comes, you're absolutely right, from not seeing what they're seeing, definitely.
Yeah.
It's good.
And I think it's quite fun how they just kind of, it's the off-screen character thing where they talk about, goes, there's hundreds, they've got this, and then you just see like a really cheap prop get thrown behind them. And, and it's a really strong, very strikingly physical comedy aspect to it, and which doesn't really do much in terms of character. Doesn't really do much in terms of character explanation that I think we'll get in a couple of other episodes. But I do quite like the. It dips into things that we've seen before with Brittas in that he's kind of reveling in the fact they've got a special guest, and then kind of almost if not improvising, just trying to make a ceremony about the fact that they're there.
Yeah.
And like it goes, oh, we're here to open a new room, and it turns out to be a toilet, the Sebastian Coe toilet.
Sebastian Coe does date this though.
Oh God, yeah.
Like, it really sets it in the mid-90s with Sebastian Coe, who just cannot act to save his life, which is not obviously his stuck in trade, but he's really terrible. I think
some of the dates me. My cultural linchpin moment that I remember Sebastian Coe for is not the Olympics. Is that he's part of the two-word tango theme song by Dick and Dom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't remember that. Yeah.
All I can remember is Sebastian Coe, celebrity two-word tango. That's the only thing I remember from that jingle. Is Sebastian Coe's like the last line of it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and which leads to kind of like almost series 1/2 style episode in the christening, where British twins get christened. Helen loses them, and I'll say it back now. Pippa Hayworth is like the MVP of this. I think it's between the key three is Hayworth, Harriet Thorpe, and Chris Barrie, obviously. But I think Pippa Hayworth storms through this series in places.
Pippa Haywood, FYI. But it wouldn't be an episode, would it, without Rodney Downey Jr. or Christopher Eccles Cake or Pippa Hayworth.
Corrected by my guest Tony Prick. I mean Black.
Sorry, I'm that guy.
Pippa Haywood.
Pippa Haywood. But you're right. Yeah, she's good. She's really good. To be honest, this one I found really quite forgettable of all of them. This one sort of passed me by, because I think, like you said, it was a bit more of a earlier season episode, and some of those fade away in my memory a little bit. And this this doesn't have really much in there that leaps out at me when I'm thinking about it. I watched most of these all of last week, and I can vividly remember Not a Good Day and all that set piece that we've just talked about. But there's not a lot in here that really stays with me, to be honest.
I think there's a couple of interesting guest appearances. You've got I can't remember the actor's name.
Horatio's back in this one, isn't he?
I can't remember the actor's name. I'm just trying to quickly, covertly, without revealing it to the audience. Oh shit, I've just done.
Oh dear.
Yeah. About the actor, but he's not on the main flipping page of the IMDb for this. Oh, what's his name?
Well, when IMDb fails us, we know we're in trouble.
Richard Brain. That's it.
Richard Brain. Oh, yeah, Dick Brain. Do you remember?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
Good old Dick Brain.
Yeah. But, he's in that. And I also remember that the shopkeeper that pretty much that interacts with Brittas, I can't remember the actor's name either.
Oh, Roger Sloman. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a very good character actor. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of times where there's been kind of recognisable faces that show up, and he's one of them. But the reason I know him from Wizardora.
Oh, okay. For me, it's Bottom. He pops up in an episode of Bottom playing their landlord, and he's hilarious. He's absolutely hilarious. Yeah. He's been in loads of things. Absolutely loads of things. He's very good. Yeah,
he's just one of those. Mr. Harrison, that's it. He's in there.
Mr. Harrison, yeah.
Mr. Harrison, yeah.
Bog off, you sad git. Basically, all he does in that, just berates them.
But I quite like. But one of the things I do quite like is that I think, particularly with this series, is that the show knows. And I remember saying this last time, that this is the series where they kind of clock on that I think Brittas works better when they make characters that are more like unbearable than he is. Yeah, and I think particularly because this is the series that introduces Drugget, and we'll get to him.
Yeah,
when you get to him later on, because they did that in the past with I can't remember the counsellor's name. she appeared in the first and the second series, but then it wasn't really much of a kind of antagonistic force. But I think with Horatio's kind of love interest being kind of like rubbing him up the wrong way to the point where she basically gets punched by Helen. Yeah, which I think got quite a big laugh for me actually. I think for me because I think Beaver Haywood really sells that punch.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, but I can see what you mean. Like, for the rest of it, it is kind of drifting because I thought they would have done a lot more with Horatio. I think it's not as it's his kind of presence apart from perhaps just to introduce his like his fiance / girlfriend. Yeah, he doesn't really do much since. I think he had a better episode last series.
Yeah, he did. I think he was just there as a catalyst for the horrible woman who comes in. Yeah, I think that's basically it.
Then leads up to an episode that I actually quite like. This one. This is Big Us Tells a Lie, in which Colin pretends to be the manager.
This is my favourite episode of the season. I genuinely, because it's a great little gambit of Colin dressing up and going, "Oh yes, I'm Mr. Brittas or Mr. Weatherby," like
Mr. Weatherby. yeah. But,
and it's quite it's a really sweet premise because all he's trying to do is impress his, admittedly quite, even though she's supposed to be like her student and she's supposed to be really clever, he's really dim daughter from Australia.
Yeah,
they make her very dim for the purposes of the story, but even so, it's very sweet what he's trying to do, and it's quite nice in that way.
Yeah, I also quite like the fact that I think Laura, because Laura kind of leads the staff in kind of like telling the lie, and then like pretty much the rest of the staff start coming to make Colin look really good. Like, so there's moments where like Linda says, "Oh, all the orphans, I want to say thank you to this," and like I think it's Julie who comes in saying, "Oh, my mum's got a cataract thanks to you. Donate £500 to get a cataract done. She can see again now." And and then it's quite kind of nice thing. But then obviously you've got the kind of like slow fuse that. It's this. Yeah, Chris Barrie's going to turn up as Brittas in a second, and then of course he does just to, for the most Brittas of reasons, to return a pen he accidentally took home with him, and he ends up having to try and fix the boiler.
Do you know what though? I think the reason I like this is because it's a very simple idea, but I think, like you've said, it is really well executed because it really does go for it. With at first everyone being, what the hell is going on? Like he's dressed up, he's in the office, he's even got the same name tag badge like stenciled on his desk, Colin Weatherby manager, and it's just that attention to detail, and the rest of them are like, what's happening? And I think it really goes for the joke, and it takes. I mean, Brittas isn't even in it for like I think nearly about 10 minutes. And that's really good. That's really, they have never done that before, and I like how much they commit to the idea, and they don't just throw it away. It becomes the central part of the whole episode, and that's why I like that, because they have in the past, had really good ideas. Like the one I think I said in the last episode or one of the previous recordings was how Brittas can't. He's doing a sponsored silence or something like, and basically it's an idea that's thrown away within the first 5 minutes of the episode when it should have been the whole episode that Brittas can't say anything.
Yeah.
Whereas this is a great example of what if Colin was the manager and he pretends to be Brittas, and they run with it, and that's great, and that's why it works, I think. Yeah,
and we've made the comparison between Brent and Basil Fawlty in the past, but I think this is the first time we have briefly compared Brittas to elements of Michael Scott, but this is the most Michael Scott that I think Brittas is in the show so far, because he talks about kind of like not lying and telling the truth and stuff, but I think the underlying factor, and we see this in episode 1 actually, through mistakes when that single mom who's like struggling, buys Brittas flowers, because it's an example of if Brittas's methodologies work correctly. What we see kind of. We're getting to see what I think Colin's idealised view of Brittas is about him being kind of nice, kind of leader and helping his employees. And I think in the last minute where he can't go through and tell Colin's daughter the truth, he sells the lie for him, and it's a really kind of genuine moment, which I think I think what Brittas thinks he's doing a lot more than he actually does. So I think he's got the capacity to be kind of like this kind of a selfless type thing, but he gets tied up in bureaucracy and his kind of morals and these rules that he has in his head. But he kind of breaks that one of his key rules, which is always be truthful, because he's never been tactful. He's kind of like anti-tact in a way, but like he'll always tell people the truth, because he sees it as a room for growth. It was quite good to see him kind of be empathetic for once. And I think the episode really kind of works and ends on a really good note, but never kind of betrays the character that Brittas is. And it does feel like it's generating this kind of development, kind of like giving character development for Brittas. And I think it really works. And I think you're right. It's probably one of the strongest episodes of the series.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly so far.
Yeah. We then go to episode 4, which is Mr. Brittas Changes Trains, which features half the staff going to a hypnotist the night before.
Yeah.
And then it involves Brittas accidentally being hypnotised to be a much better person. And this is, on paper, sounds better than it actually is.
Yeah, I agree.
And a lot of it, I think, is going back to an element of the series that I've never particularly liked, which is the Brittas Laura goes, will they, won't they? Because I don't think the show wants to commit to that, but somehow does.
No. Yeah. It really doesn't know what it wants to do with this.
Yeah.
And this is a good. I think mainly because it struggles to square the idea that you could realistically have Gordon Brittas as a romantic figure, because I don't see how you can possibly do it. You know, he is the super anal love child of Basil Fawlty and Kenneth Williams. Yeah. How can you possibly have him be a romantic lead, in the sense that a woman like Laura, who is the normal one, let's face it, she's the normal one.
She's the I can't remember. I never get I can get the two mixed up. The Ernie Wise.
Yeah, he's the yeah. She's the Ernie, if you like. Yeah. And you know, I can't see how she would fall for Brittas. Yeah. I don't understand that. And you know what I mean? And this episode obviously plays with the idea that if he was hypnotized and it sort of removed all the Brittas elements from him, or a lot of the Brittas elements, she might start to find him attractive. That, okay, I can maybe buy. But I don't really see the point in some senses, because obviously the show's never going to do that, because the comedy is because he is the way he is. Yeah. So it feels like a slightly pointless exercise to me.
Yeah, and it has a knock-on effect in a couple of later episodes, because they're trying to make it an ongoing kind of story arc almost. And I think it kind of betrays Brittas as a character, because we've talked a bit, like particularly series 1 and 2, how I think because they wrote Helen to be they wrote Helen slightly differently, so that she's always having affairs and just somehow and like you're trying to remember why she's with Brittas, but
they have a hint of that though, don't they? Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. They have a hint of that in the last episode where she's in that porn mag. Yeah, and she sent a picture of herself into readers' wives, and she's trying to hide it from Brittas. Yeah. And that's a little bit of a wink back to that earlier Helen, who was apparently having an affair and all this, and they can't quite let go of the idea that maybe she's a bit of a tramp, which I don't like that, because it feels like they move. I don't understand what that is in a way. Like, what are they trying to say? What are they? It feels like they almost want Brittas to leave her and have an affair with Laura. But at the same time, they know that it just wouldn't be right in so many ways. Yeah,
but I think earlier seasons has had Brittas kind of so besotted with Helen to the point where on paper, Brittas would be the perfect partner / perfect husband, because he's in his view he's 100% supportive of his wife, but because also he's Brittas, he doesn't see how him being to be overly supportive in his tactless way, he's like causing her to be like on the verge of a panic attack and nervous breakdown every so often. So from this and what will happen in a couple of episodes' time as well, it just does. And we'll probably just get to this. I think it's episode 6. We'll probably talk about Davis further. It doesn't ring true, but we'll get to that in a moment. So I wasn't particularly fond of this, but
no.
Then we have episode 5, which I think, like Biggles Tells a Lie, is an episode that probably wouldn't have done if it was 6 episodes. This is the Gavin episode, which has Gavin's former fiancée, Jennifer, appear.
This is the worst episode of the season.
Yeah.
I think, for a number of reasons. But go for it. You carry on.
Yeah, so, which involves, like Gavin's former girlfriend coming in, Colin trying to self-sustain the leisure centre by using the kind of customers,
the sewage,
customer sewage to generate electricity.
That's funny. That is a funny moment.
Yeah, and then kind of Helen developing lockjaw.
Yeah.
No, she doesn't. No, that was a previous episode. Because Helen's not in this one. Helen's currently in Cornwall. But then they discover that Jen escaped from a mental institution and is actually a narcissist and involves the leisure centre nearly burning down again. So, Chris, why do you think this is the worst episode yet? Is it in the whole series so far?
Yeah, I kind of think it is, and the reason is because I think, for one thing, haven't we essentially established that Gavin and Tim are gay and that's okay in this show in its own roundabout way? This episode almost seems like it's designed to really dig in. It seems like the only thing they can do with those two is make a joke of the fact that they're gay and Brittas doesn't see it, basically. Mm-hmm. And it really dates the show to this period, because you just wouldn't get this joke done anymore, because it is complete. I wouldn't say it's homophobia, but it's complete homo blindness to a ridiculous, almost insulting degree. Everybody in that leisure centre would know that Gavin and Tim are gay and are a couple. And some of them obviously do. Someone like Julie, for instance, does know that, say, and she doesn't care, right? But Brittas isn't stupid. He's many things, but he's not stupid. And the whole thing, the one point is that I think it makes Brittas stupid for the purposes of this joke. And the other thing is that, yes, okay, the idea that the gay guy has a fiancée who turns out to be mad, tee-hee, it feels like it should have been, it's a joke that wasn't funny in the 60s or the 70s, let alone the 90s. And she is she doesn't exist. She's not real. There's no way that woman would ever exist. She is just a completely ridiculous, literally eye-twitching arsonist comic construct that, again, it just serves no purpose at all. I just think it's such reductive comedy. It's not hateful or insulting. Well, no, it is a bit insulting. It's not hateful, but it's so reductive to the point that I was sitting there thinking, this is just dated even for this era.
Yeah.
Whereas there are other episodes, like I say, Biggles Tells a Lie, which is simpler but more effective in terms of the comedy. Bit old-fashioned, sure. Loads of sitcoms in the past have done that same joke, but there's a sweetness to it. Whereas with this, it's just a bit rubbish in terms of what it's saying and how it's executed, I think.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And I think, but I do think that the show never explicitly mentions it, but you can read into it. And I think, but this might get more apparent in later series involving characters we haven't seen yet. But there's a strong thing online which suggests that Gavin might be bisexual.
Okay.
And there's a couple of times, I think in the past, there's been, because Tim's very prone to being quite jealous.
We'll see that a lot, don't we? Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure there's, and I'm not going to get too spoilery because I can't remember how much you know, but there is instances that Tim gets jealous of Gavin's friendship with a female character who hasn't been introduced yet in a future series. So I don't think the show is kind of societally if that's an actual word, mature enough to realise
It is now.
he's mature enough to realise that Gavin could potentially have been a representation of a bisexual character. Then perhaps just being homosexual rather but being bisexual. I think that's probably what the show might have been going through. If that was the intent, or if even accidentally, I mean, I think the representation of bisexual characters, I think, was non-existent in the 90s. I can't think of any off the top of my head. But I think that might have been. I think the intent for the character for Gavin might be that he's actually bisexual, so that's why they brought a female kind of cast.
Okay, it's still really like
the character of Jen is absolutely awful.
It's
absolutely
rubbish.
Awful. Yeah,
like I've got no issue with that idea, like at all. But don't make the idea that Gavin might have had a woman fancy him turn out to be like she's just stepped out of Misery by Stephen King, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, don't necessarily turn her into like a psychopath. Because it is the messaging behind that isn't good for me. But I think a lot of more people would have found this funny back then. I think it's just one of those examples of it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah,
like it's too old fashioned.
Yeah, but he does give Chris Barrie a chance to kind of physically pretend he's being electrocuted. I think visually it's quite an interesting gag to end the episode on, and it kind of ties in with the admittedly better part of the episode, which is the Colin subplot, which is completely in character. And
that's good. Yeah, all that's fine.
Yeah, and like has a bit. It's kind of like cheap, almost toilet humor, literal toilet
humor,
which I think is actually quite funny.
No, it is quite funny.
Yeah. So we lead on to the episode. If it's not probably not my least favorite, but an episode that I had issues with that I was alluding to slightly earlier, which is Shall We Dance, which Helen's away on Cornwall, so Pippa Haywood's not in this one that often, and so there's a kind of like staff social they're going to, and Brittas is like, oh no, everyone has to have a partner. Everyone has to have a partner, blah blah blah. Like if you're going on your own, you're a loser of stuff. Which is, as someone who's as a single person, he's absolutely bollocks.
That is. Yeah. As a married person, I still say that's bollocks. Yeah.
But I think, there's a couple of interesting ideas, but the way it's been handled's a bit off. I mean, I quite like the idea. The episode kind of suggests that the staff think that Brittas and Laura are having an affair. Because there are moments where there's a very kind of weird, kind of stylistically interesting choice where they show a flashback going from a picture which shows them gardening, because earlier there's a bit saying, oh, Brittas has got some flowers for you apparently, and it's actually a bag of seeds, which I think which at first is like completely in line with earlier Brittas that was talking about, that someone who's completely besotted with Helen. Right, and like innocently just being friends with someone that everyone else kind of misinterpreted as Brittas having an affair. Now, if that was the way it went, I think that would have been great, because then you've got Brittas who's slightly been a bit lonely without Helen around. I think the previous episode, I think it was Brittas was saying that, she left a load of stuff in the freezer. They're all pizzas, but I've been eating them.
Yeah,
yeah, and I quite like the fact that Laura kind of like thinks he needs a friend or something, and I quite like that kind of platonic element to them. But then I think there's probably some mileage about the fact that perhaps in another life Laura might have been attracted to him. But I don't buy Brittas's jealousy of Michael and the kind of almost not realising he's got a crush on a co-worker, and it feels so disingenuous to the character. I would much rather they've gone with him perhaps doing things in a friendship platonic way, but being misinterpreted by everybody else and the gossip kind of hive that's been generating around him as being romantic. I think there's a lot more mileage in that than what we actually get, which is like Brittas getting quite almost very jealous of Michael returning, and I mean the fact that Helen comes back because of this dance. I mean, I don't know whether that's slightly out of character for Helen. I'm not sure, but then Brittas being absolutely kind of in a slump and a grump over the fact that Laura's back with her ex-husband, it doesn't ring true at all.
No,
It just
it doesn't.
it feels wrong, and I'm not a fan of it at all.
Yeah, it does feel wrong. I agree. All the way through, I was thinking the same. It's odd. I mean, they bring back that Michael character. I mean, he's purely there in order to try and service this awkward suggestion of Brittas, being jealous, and it doesn't. And suddenly Laura's like, oh yeah, I'm in love with him. Well, you never mention him. He's never. I'm pretty sure last time as well, you didn't really want to know when he was asking you to marry him. I mean, bear in mind, this guy's like a multi-millionaire guy, and he was last series. He was trying to get her to start this empire and have this dynasty with him, and then she went, no, thanks. And now suddenly he's back, and she's in love with him, and it's like, well, where's this come from?
Yeah,
it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. It's just purely there to try and force this idea that isn't funny. It's not a funny idea. It's almost like it's come out of a romantic sitcom, and this is not a romantic sitcom. That's the thing. There are romantic sitcoms, there are things like As Time Goes By or May to December, or, there's loads of things like that, loads of the Just Good Friends. There's loads of romantic sitcoms, and a lot of them are very funny. But this is not a romantic sitcom. This is an eccentric, weird, in places, look at the running of a leisure centre by a man whose fastidiousness and extreme anal, obsession is what exasperates his staff, exasperates the customers. It is Fawlty Towers in a leisure centre, as I've said many times before. This is a bit like if Fawlty Towers had done a story where Basil starts to fall in love with Polly. And it's a bit like, well, you would have gone, what? Or Polly starts to fall in love with Basil. It's like, what? No, that would never happen. It would never happen. And that show was smart enough to never do that. Even if in real life the two actors were married and had plenty of chemistry, and they could have absolutely have done that. And in some level it would have been it would have made a sort of sense, but it never does, because it knows that's not funny. Whereas this show doesn't seem to understand that. It seems to think we want them to get together. And I don't know about you, I don't. I'm like,
no.
That doesn't make sense.
I mean, in my head, I've got an episode where gradually all the staff are pretty much gossiping and trying to work out what's going on between Laura and Brittas, which leads to a massive head where at the very end goes, what? No. Goes,
yeah.
What? What? And I said to him, what? Having an affair with Laura? Play inadvertently calling Laura unattractive or something.
Yeah.
No, I love my wife. I will not stray. I says, I've been lonely. I've been lonely ever since they've gone to Cornwall for 3, 4, 5 weeks now, or something silly like that. But no, my heart is with someone else. Now that I could completely buy. I think it's a much better and much more true to the character, and keeps Brittas on the level of kind of sympathy, because there are elements of him being unlikable, but you never hate him. There are a lot, and there are you root for him a lot more often than I was surprised how often you root for Brittas as a character.
I think a lot of that is thanks to Chris Barrie, really, and the way he plays him.
But this was a complete miss in terms of the character and stuff. He just feels so disingenuous, and thankfully it's like the kind of closing of that bit. But and then we get to kind of the last two, which is almost a 2-part story, which and it's, I think structurally it's the most interesting kind of 2 episodes in the series so far, I think. So we had the first half, which is the chop, which brings in Councillor Druggett, who I thought was in the show a lot earlier than this, because I remember Druggett, because Druggett is the antagonist, and I think it's the show realising that they need someone they need a massive prick who just hates Brittas, but is in a position to threaten him, which they've never really had before. It's just kind of comedy people go, "Are you Gordon Brittas?" and then rough him up and stuff, or just shout at him. But they've never had someone who's been in a position to kind of threaten the status quo of the show, which actually happens. And you've got a character who has the power and succeeds, and it helps you I think the show kind of almost starts to try to redeem itself into making you really despise Brittas, the previous episode, because you suddenly realise that it's practically a different character. It's the character we've seen, and his kind of fundamental reason for being is being challenged, and it's because of his unconditional love for his wife, who a previous episode ago was emotionally having an affair with. He kind of sacrifices his dream to protect his wife, which I think is completely in character.
Yep.
Completely in character. It works really well. I think it's not as funny as perhaps other episodes, but in terms of the character itself, there's an element of, and I know you and Rob talked about this on, you've been watching, the British sitcoms have a very uncanny ability to be able to be dramatic. Now, this isn't as dramatic as Only Fools and Horses or One Foot in the Grave ever gets, but or Red Dwarf at times,
or The Office, which
does
Office, this exact thing. And obviously that's part of the climactic beat of the whole series, granted, whereas this isn't quite the same. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, this isn't quite that level of pathos, but it's definitely a level of drama that the show isn't normally doing. Yeah. And I think it's probably one of the better examples of understanding what Brittas is as a character of the show so far. And yeah, I think it's let down by the fact that the comedy aspect isn't as kind of as well structured as Beagles Tells a Lie. Or I think or the gang warfare from I think series 2 episode. But I really quite like this. I quite liked this for the character study stuff, and I think it works quite well. And I quite like the fact that it kind of brings Carol into it. I mean, Carol's been quite sidelined in this series. I was just about to say, this is the first time we've mentioned Carol, and we've been talking for an hour. How does that happen? Like, how do you waste Harriet Thorpe again for a whole series?
Yeah.
Like, please tell me she has more to do in the last few series, because I'm pretty sure I remember her having more to do in this show. And I'm assuming that's from the last few seasons, because she has nothing. She has barely anything in certainly this season, especially.
Yeah, I mean, we completely forgot to mention it, but the previous episode actually, I quite like the subplot of kind of like a high school sweetheart coming to kind of coming back,
trying to desperately find his way through the through the building. And there's a great thing where he gets locked in and he ends up trying to crawl through the ducts and stuff. And I actually, it was the best part of the episode. I actually generally quite like that, and it adds to the tragedy of Carol's character. And because like she's probably the most kind of sympathetic and kind of like sympathetic character, or the one you kind of feel sad for the most. And it's funny, but you also think it's heartbreaking at the same time. Yeah, and they kind of throw that in. But I mean it's a pretty on character payoff as well. And I think part of it is to make you really hate Drugget. I think him going after Carol, because Carol's probably, as I said, the most sympathetic, going after and chucking her out because of like pretty much because of like the hardships he's done through. I think it works for you making this antagonistic character really a massive prick that you really can't stand, and builds him up to be a substantial threat. I think that's probably the reason that's happened there. But then it gives you, and then it kind of ends with this kind of very weird fantasy that Brittas has been having of the guillotine. And in the French Revolution or whatever,
but to the point that the French Revolution stuff with Harriet Thorpe and Chris Barrie is the DVD packaging. All the DVD packaging,
right.
The DVD packaging is Chris Barrie in the French Revolution garb, and then you open it.
Strange.
Yeah, and you open it up, and like there's the shot of Harriet Thorpe and Chris Barrie, both of them in there. But then I think the DVDs have got a shot from, it's got like the hero shot from the next episode, but a lot of it is centered on that French Revolution stuff. So any more on the chop before we head to High Noon?
No, really, you've kind of said it all. I think really that it's a big episode for him as a character. What do you
think of Drugget? Actually, I don't know if you mentioned.
I remember him. I do remember him. I mean, I remember the actor Stephen Churchip more from EastEnders, because he goes on to play Phil Mitchell's crooked solicitor, Marcus Christie in EastEnders, who then basically betrays Phil and steals all his money and then buggers off to like Brazil or whatever.
We talk about Brookside being the cool soap to watch, but there was a time that was EastEnders, but that was pretty much anything to do with the Mitchells. To the point actually that recently had a half an hour flashback episode of a young Peggy
Yeah.
Mitchell, which I haven't watched yet, but I really want to.
Me too. Yeah, I'm very curious about that. I haven't watched EastEnders for literally about 10 years or more now. But like, yeah, back in the day, it was essential.
It's basically is Ross Kent coming back? Then yeah, I'm watching it.
Probably.
Yeah,
They'll all be back at some point, won't they? If they're alive. But
yeah, the actor himself.
I remember him in the Brittas Empire though, and I was like, oh yeah, that guy, and I'm assuming that he comes back a fair bit from now on because he definitely stuck in my mind.
Yeah. Actually, what we're talking about, Stephen Church, who's the actor who played Drugget, sadly passed away this year in January.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Shame.
January the 1st. So this year. So he was 74 years of age. But yeah, he's been 73 episodes. He was in EastEnders, but he's been in loads of stuff. He was in Marple. He was in Lewis for an episode. Infinite Worlds of H.G. Wells as the clergyman.
Right.
The Bill, which everyone's been in the Bill.
Everyone was in the Bill. Yeah.
What's great is that he's been in 6 episodes of the Bill, all completely different characters. Two of them have got the same name. Two of them have got the same first name.
Somebody needs to write some sort of grand unifying theory about how the Bill was full of clones.
Yes,
because there are so many people who appear in the same London borough, Sun Hill or whatever it was called, and they all look the same.
Yeah, but I think so. Yeah, it was quite sad when I found that out, and I thought, I'm going to mention that because he's very much like a previous guest stars in this, that they're kind of like recognisable faces, and he's been in so much.
He has. Yeah.
So he's only been in 1 episode this series so far, but we've still got 2 series left, and he's actually in 7 more episodes. So we don't. So we don't see the end of Drugget. So I think because it is clearly to create a brand new kind of antagonist, so that every time we see him, we're like,
makes sense.
Yeah.
So, boo hiss.
Yeah. So we end with High Noon, where we have Brittas now kind of out of a job, working as a petrol attendant. A petrol attendant. The Leisure Centre has a new manager called Alan, who's a very disorganised, apathetic, kind of almost anti-Brittas, very kind of prone to anger. Brittas still shows up to cause chaos. There's then an accident involving a gas leak, an explosion, and then Brittas accidentally becomes a hero. Well, I'll say accidentally. He's aided accidentally, I think, but it's the right way. But so what did you think of the finale?
Well, it's obviously a bit of a kitchen sink finale, isn't it? This is the if we want to use a Doctor Who comparison, this is the journey's end of the Brittas Empire, where it literally all goes boom. It's the kind of thing that I think you would only get on a show like the Brittas Empire, where it's not quite reality, it's slightly hyper-real. There was an episode of One Foot in the Grave where Victor Meldrew's house gets blown up while he's away on holiday, and then they come back and their house is gone, basically. And that was used as a comic beat. Whereas I suppose the difference with this is that this is meant to be a hero moment for Brittas. Mm-hmm. And I suppose it's the idea, if you want to get into what's the word? A symbolic representation of the show. It's part of Brittas's rebirth into being, the manager of Whitby Leisure Centre. It has to be blown up and then rebuilt for him to begin a new dawn after having this moment where he's, going to be a petrol station and actually causing so many problems at the petrol station that all the cars are queued up, and he's like, no, stay there, you'll get in an orderly line and you will queue for petrol, which I thought was very funny because all the cars are like, beep, beep. I
think it's quite funny. And then I quite like the callback joke where Helen, I think, talks to, he goes like, oh, it's his first day. He started at 9, he was back at 10 past.
Exactly, yeah.
I quite like that kind of like gag and stuff. But
yeah, exactly. So no, it's a big episode, and it's an effective way to close out the season, I suppose, really. And it is an example of how the show is trying to do a level of continuing storytelling and put a level of dramatic stakes in there, I suppose, really. Mm-hmm. And yeah, what about you? Did you like it?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I think because I think there's mileage. I think it's mileage in having the characters, particularly these characters. I think work better when they've got. Well, some of the characters work better when they've got kind of ongoing things or the right things anyway. And I think what we're having is kind of Brittas's kind of reason for being and his dream to his dream, which I think is only like brought up once at the start of this season. Actually, I think that's the dream isn't. No, Colin's daughter actually brings up the dream, and I think that's what makes him kind of continue bigging Colin up is because of is because Colin's been talking about the dream. It was actually that he's been influenced by his employee's dream. And that the fact that she wants to become a leisure centre manager because of her dad kind of boosts that dream. But I think because being a leisure centre manager is such a key part of Brittas's life. I think he was like he'll sink with the ship. And I do think that a lot of it is, and I do think particularly he was held up because of the weight, the barbell. Weight holding up the steel but girder. But I do still think that even without that, I think the implication is that Brittas still perhaps would still try and get as many people out and try and help as many people at his own risk. I think. And I don't want to get too spoilery. We do get other examples of that later on, in a bigger way. And I do think that's a key part of Brittas as a character, and again helps you remember that you are supposed to like this character. And as much as you can you say is the only reason that he's holding up is because of the barbell, I still think he's still telling people to go and to leave him there. And he's pretty much he was pretty much willing to stay there as he kept the thing open. And I think that says a lot about the character. We've always said that he's well-intentioned in places, and I think when it comes down to it, he is fundamentally a good person and will do the right thing. And I think this is pretty much an example of him doing that.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely, yeah, no, it is. It's that reaffirmation of the character, I think, really. No, yeah, and it's a good episode. It is a good episode. I think it rounds off a season that's been largely successful, pretty well. I think there've been fewer duds in this series, in this season, than some previous seasons, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's it definitely sets things up for the next season, really, in a big way. It can't get much bigger, really, than blowing it all up.
Well, you say that. Series 5, I mean, I've been hinting at some interesting developments. Series 5 is the one I've been looking forward to talking about. So I've been really looking forward to revisiting it because a lot of the key episodes that I have memories of come from Series 5. Particularly one or two of them, which I really can't wait. So I don't know how much you remember from what happens.
No, nothing. I have no idea.
Okay, I am really looking forward to talking series. I can't wait to talk about Series 5 because we're going to have a very interesting conversation about the last episode of Series 5.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
All right then.
So
bring it on.
Yeah, as well as the last episode of Series 7, but we're nowhere near that yet.
No, we've got a while.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, here we are. We finished Series 4 of the Brittas Empire. Had a bit of a trek back to 1994. I'm going to assume you're still not agreeing to this.
No, it's good fun. Yeah, it's good. It's allowed me to rediscover a show that I remember when I was a kid. And no, it's always good. It's always good fun. Thanks for doing it. Yeah.
No problem. So yeah, again, I don't know when Series 5 will drop. It'll probably be sometime in like perhaps March or April next year, depending on what we're doing with Series 8. We have a couple of other things coming up around after Series 8 first, I think. But we will be back for Series 5 of the Brittas Empire, because I really cannot wait to talk about Series 5. Because I really hope that it's either as good or as interesting as I remember. So, Tony, before we go, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Best place to find me is at AJ Black Writer on Twitter and culturalconversation.co.uk for all the links to my blogs and books and podcasts and other things like that. And generally on We Made This, the podcast network we're on. We_made this on Twitter and wemadethisnetwork.com. And you can find all the other things I'm doing. It would take me about another hour to list them, so I won't do that for you. I won't put you through that.
Yeah, I think the one thing I think, if you're listening to this and enjoying this, the one that I think is currently my favourite podcast that you're doing at the moment, is You Have Been Watching, which is the British sitcom stuff. There is a lot of overlap. If anyone who's listening to Shipwrecked and Comatose, particularly have been enjoying the Brittas Empire episodes, Tony has the British sitcom podcast he does with a much more knowledgeable co-host than I ever will be in terms of British sitcoms. I recommend You've Been Watching. It is a fascinating and really enjoyable podcast.
Well, cheers. Don't sell yourself too short. You know a fair bit. You're pretty good, and we'll hopefully get you on at some point because we're going to try and get some guests on in 2023. But no, we've got a lot of good fun stuff planned for next year. We've got, as I say, we've got an episode on Absolutely Fabulous, which should be available by the time you listen to this, I think. We're going to be covering Mike Bassett, England manager, and the TV show around the time of the World Cup, which is imminent as well as you listen to this.
I'm pretty sure I've got that series on DVD, but I can never remember if I've watched it. I cannot remember the TV series.
Well, here's your opportunity, to be fair.
Because I love the film.
The film's brilliant.
I love that film.
Yeah, so we're going to have a lot of fun.
That film is a lot funnier than I'd ever expected it to be.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it's a great movie.
Yeah.
So like we're gonna enjoy that, and we're gonna talk generally about football comedies and sitcoms as well in that one. So that's going to be fun. And then going into next year, we've got some.
Talking about football comedies, there might be in the future specials on Shipwrecked and Comatose about Chris Barrie playing a former footballer.
Oh yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but I remember I know what you're talking
Prince
about.
Among Men.
Prince Among Men, that's it. Well, we might well see if we can watch that before and briefly mention it on You Have Been Watching. But yeah, we've got that, and then going into 2023, we've got some fun plans. We've got things like we're going to do. I mentioned it actually earlier. Just Good Friends, the comedy. From the 80s, we're going to do Last of the Summer Wine. We're not going to watch them all though, because that would take us about 5,000 years. We're going to do lots of themed things around certain anniversaries, and then some cult stuff as well. So we've got some really diverse and interesting chats to come in 2023. So you're going to enjoy it. Yeah.
And again, if you want to listen. If you suddenly realise, wow, that Matt's good at hosting stuff. Does he host other stuff? Yes, I do. I've just released. So I think at the time of airing, I may have just released episode 100 of Pick a Disc.
Amazing, well done.
Yeah,
Clap.
Episode 100. I can't believe. Yeah, amazing. I've gone past the third episode of a podcast once. I talk to people about albums that they like. Blah 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 blah. I'm also a co-host. I'm with Kurt. I co-host another one with Kurt and Tony called Now Book Club, which has been on a very, very long hiatus because the show it covers hasn't aired yet, hasn't been airing, which will be hopefully back at some point in 2023, fingers crossed.
Yellow Jackets,
Yeah, covering Yellow Jackets. And also I am hosting Ask Us About Loom, which is about point-and-click adventure games. So, yeah, just type them into a podcast search engine and you'll find them. And
amazing.
And with that, it's time for us to say goodbye, Tony. So thank you ever so much for coming along again.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks again. Looking forward to season 5. Series 5. Can't say seasons, can we? It's not American. Series 5.
No, and there's only one thing left to say, which is excellent.
Excellent.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This Podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at wemadethispod.
Do you like music and do you like podcasts? Chances are you like music podcasts. Take this one for example, Pick a Disc. I'm Matt Latham, and every fortnight a guest comes on to Pick a Disc to talk about an album for any reason that they want to. We'll talk about the album as a whole, we talk about the songs, we talk about any personal stories about the album, and if they've ever seen the band live, and all sorts of other crazy tangents. And if at any point any of that made you want to listen to Pick a Disc, then you can find us on your podcast apps of choice, or on the Facebooks and Twitters and Instagram under Pick a Disc. We're also on the We Made This Podcast Network on WeMadeThisNetwork.com, and on Twitter at We_Made This. Goodbye.